Welcome to BeFM Drama, where we turn great works of English literature into gripping radio. I'm your host, Joshua Cornwell, and today we're bringing you part 3 in a 5-part adaptation of A Dream of Armageddon by H.G. Wells, a classic work of Victorian science fiction. In this story, our narrator finds himself seated on a train with a very interesting travel companion, a stranger who has been haunted by vivid dreams, in which he seems to inhabit the life of another man hundreds of years in the future. The man in the dreams was once a powerful politician, but he turned his back on the world in favor of a life of love and leisure on the Italian resort island of Capri. In his absence, the world now teeters on the brink of disaster as the powerful nation he has forsaken falls under the spell of a rash demagogue named Evesham, threatening global war. As we return to the story, the troubled dreamer wakes from the first night of his dream back to his life in 19th century England, which has mixed strangely with the incomprehensible recollection of another life in the distant future.
My strange traveling companion seemed to shudder slightly at the recollection of his confusion, waking up the morning after his first dream, back in Liverpool with his mind filled with another man's life and thoughts.
Only for a time I could not believe that all these vivid moments had been no more than the substance of a dream. In truth, I could not believe it a dream for all the sobering reality of things about me. I bathed and dressed as if it were by habit, and as I shaved I argued why I, of all men, should leave the woman I loved to go back to the fantastic politics in the hard and strenuous north. Even if Evesham did force the world back to war, what was that to me? I was a man with the heart of a man, and why should I feel the responsibility of a deity for the way the world might go? You know, that is not quite the way I think about affairs, about my real affairs. I am a solicitor, you know, with a point of view. The vision was so real, you must understand, so utterly unlike a dream that I kept perpetually recalling little irrelevant details. Have you ever heard of a dream that had a quality like that?
Like?
So that afterwards you remembered little details you had forgotten.
Never. That is what you never seem to do with dreams.
No, but that is just what I did. I am a solicitor, you must understand, in Liverpool, and I could not help wondering what the clients and business people I found myself talking to in my office would think if I told them suddenly I was in love with a girl who would be born a couple of 100 years or so hence, and worried about the politics of my great-great-great-grandchildren. I was very busy that day negotiating a 99-year building lease. That night I had no dream, nor did I dream the next night, at least to remember anything. Something of that intense reality of conviction vanished. I began to feel sure that it was a dream. And then it came again. When the dream came again nearly 4 days later, it was very different. I think it's certain that 4 days had also elapsed in the dream. Many things had happened in the north, and I was full of moody musings. Why, in spite of all, should I go back to toil and stress, insults and perpetual dissatisfaction, simply to save hundreds of millions of common people I did not love from the stress and anguish of war and infinite misrule? And after all, I might fail. They all sought their own narrow ends, and why should not I? Why should not I also live as a man? And out of such thoughts her voice summoned me, and I lifted my eyes. I found myself awake and walking. We had come out above the pleasure city. We were near the summit of Monte Solaro and looking towards the bay. It was a late afternoon and very clear. Far away to the left, Ischia hung in a golden haze between sea and sky, and Naples was coldly white against the hills. And before us was Vesuvius with a tall and slender streamer feathering at last towards the south, and the ruins of Torre dell'Annunziato and Castellamare glittering and near.
You have been to Capri, of course.
Only in the dream. Only in this dream. All across the bay, beyond Sorrento, were the floating palaces of the pleasure city moored and chained, and northward were the broad floating stages that received the aeroplanes. Aeroplanes fell out of the sky every afternoon, each bringing its thousands of pleasure seekers from the uttermost parts of the earth to Capri and its delights. All these things, I say, stretched below. We noticed them only incidentally because of an unusual sight that evening. 5 war aeroplanes that had long slumbered useless in the distant arsenals of the Rhinemouth were maneuvering now in the eastward sky. Evesham had astonished the world by producing them in others and setting them to circle here and there. It was the threat material in the great game of bluff he was playing, and it had taken even me by surprise. He was one of those incredibly stupid, energetic people who seemed sent by heaven to create disasters. His energy at the first glance seemed wonderfully like capacity, but he had no imagination, no invention, only a stupid, vast driving force of will and a mad faith in his idiot luck to pull him through. I remember how we stood out upon the headland watching the squadron circling far away, and how I weighed the full meaning of the sight, seeing clearly the way things must go. And then, even then, it was not too late. I might have gone back, I think, and saved the world. The people of the North would follow me, I knew, granted only that in one thing I respected their moral standards. The East and South would trust me as they would trust no other Northern man, and I knew I had only to put it to her, and she would have let me go, not because she did not love me. Only I did not want to go. My will was all the other way about. I had so newly thrown off the weight of responsibility. I was still so fresh a renegade from duty that the daylight clearness of what I ought to do had no power at all to touch my will. My will was to live, to gather pleasures, and make my dear lady happy. But though this sense of vast neglected duties had no power to draw me, it could make me silent and preoccupied. It robbed the days I had spent of half their brightness and roused me into dark meditations in the silence of the night. And as I stood and watched Evesham's aeroplanes sweep to and fro, those birds of infinite ill omen, she stood beside me, watching me, perceiving the trouble. Her face was gray because the sunset was fading out of the sky, and presently over the hill crest those war things came flying one behind the other.
What were they like?
They had never fought. They were like our ironclads are nowadays. They had never fought. No one knew what they might do with excited men inside them. Few even cared to speculate. They were great driving things shaped like spearheads without a shaft, with a propeller in the place of the shaft.
Steel?
Not steel.
Aluminum?
No, nothing of the sort. An alloy that was very common as brass, for example. It was called, let me see. I'm forgetting everything.
And they carried guns?
Little guns, firing high explosive shells. They fired the guns backwards out of the base of the leaf, so to speak, and rammed with the beak. That was a theory, but they had never fought. No one could tell exactly what was going to happen. And meanwhile, I suppose it was very fine to go whirling through the air like a flight of young swallows, swift and easy. I guess the captains tried not to think too clearly of what the real thing would be like. And these flying war machines, were only one sort of the endless war contrivances that had been invented and had fallen into disuse during the long peace. Big engines, terrible explosives, great guns. As we went down the winding steps to our hotel again in the twilight, I foresaw it all. I saw how clearly and inevitably things were moving towards war in Evesham's silly, violent hands, and I had some inkling of what war was bound to be like under these new conditions. And even then, though I knew I was drawing near the limit of my opportunity, I could find no will to go back. That was my last chance. We didn't go into the city until the sky was full of stars, so we walked out upon the high terrace, to and fro. She counseled me to go back, begged me to go back to my duty, weeping and clinging to my arm. Then suddenly she fell mute, and glancing down at her face, I read in an instant the thing she thought to do. It was one of those moments when one sees. "No," I said, and she blinked in surprise. "Nothing," I said, "shall send me back. Nothing. I have chosen love. I have chosen, and the world must go. Whatever happens, I will have this life. I will live for you. Nothing shall turn me aside. Nothing, my dear one. Even if you died. Yes," she murmured softly. "Then I also would die." And before she could speak again, I began to talking eloquently, as I could do in that life, talking to exalt love, to make the life we were living seem heroic and glorious, and the thing I was deserting something hard and enormously ignoble, that it was a fine thing to set aside. I sought not only to convert her, but myself as well. We talked, and she clung to me, and at last I did make it sound heroic, made all the thickening disaster of the world only a sort of glorious setting for our unparalleled love, and we two poor foolish souls strutted there at last, clad in the splendid delusion, drunken rather with that glorious delusion, under the still stars. And so my moment passed. It was my last chance. Even as we spoke there, the leaders of the South and East were gathering their resolve, and the hot answer that shattered Evesham's bluffing forever took shape and waited. And all over Asia and the ocean and the South, the air and the wires were throbbing with the warnings to prepare, prepare. And with that, we come to the end of our episode. What will become of our dreamer as the world of the dream hurtles ever closer to destruction? Will the man whose life he inhabits, that proud old politician defying responsibility for love, bear the consequences of his terrible choice? Find out tomorrow as we near the conclusion of this strange tale here on BeFM Drama.